you know, of note, Ms. Even also is the committee secretary for the Corporations Committee, and I'm sure others as well. And the Corporations Committee also met twice yesterday, going till about, what was that, 7:30 last night. And so she was up bright and early again this morning and really working hard for us. So thank you so much, Judy. We appreciate you greatly and all of the moving parts that we are navigating here. With that, we'll start with roll call.
Senator Cooper,
Here.
Senator French,
Here.
Senator Kolb,
Present.
Senator Cost,
Here.
Chairman Nethercott.
Here. All right, with that, folks, as you heard from our meeting this morning, we had laid back House Bill 236 engrossed firearms transactions, financial discrimination into this lunch meeting. After speaking with the sponsor and many of the stakeholders, it's been requested that we lay that bill back to next Wednesday. They're going to work on some amendments with the governor's office, the banking division, and the sponsors themselves. So I think we'll have a really great bill in front of us next Wednesday, and just want to let all of you know, and that was a fast moving decision, and I think it will result in a better outcome for the bill and for the state. And sorry, some of that wasn't communicated to some of those interested parties I see here in the room, but appreciate your time. And you're welcome to hang out with us for the rest of our lunch meeting. But for those of you that know, I think Representative Washut did stop by, and he is in agreement with that decision as well. So just so you know, that's what's taking place. Also, another change on the agenda is the first item up for our House Journal Resolution 11, sponsored by Representative Sommers. We will hear that on Monday as a result of Representative Sommers needing to move that schedule around due to his busy time over in the House of Representatives. So we will not hear that over this lunch hour, leaving us with the remaining 3 bills. We're going to get to you, Representative Sweeney, and we're going to start with House Joint Resolution 9, Local Government Investment in Equities. Welcome, Representative Sweeney. It's great to see you in front of the Senate Judiciary Committee.
Thank you, Madam Chairman.
If you want to, the floor is yours. If you want to just walk us through the bill, and we'll be happy to hear from you.
Yes. Got a few folks here to testify, and I'll just quickly walk you through this. As you may be aware, state statute 94831 delineates how public funds may be invested. For counties and municipalities, the menu of potential investments is pretty narrow. Generally speaking, it includes CDs, money market accounts, and bonds, but not equities. One can deduce that the rationale behind this narrow list is that local governments need to keep their funds, public funds, liquid and away from any downside risk. Tying up their funds in equities and other longer-term investments would not make sense for most local governments. The state of Wyoming, however, has recognized the need to diversify its investments into other vehicles. For instance, the Permanent Mineral Trust Fund and the Wyoming retirement system have broad ability to put money into a wide array of investment vehicles. The thought process being that the corpus of these funds either would not be touched or the liquidity needs would not be immediate or even in the foreseeable future. One of the true things when our current chief executive was treasurer, he moved forward. I think it was considered Amendment A, so that we could invest part of our permanent mineral trust funds into equities, which really has enabled us to get more earnings to put back into the general fund, because we all know we can't touch the corpus. There are a number of counties, and I believe I do not know how many, and a number of municipalities that, due to their robust mineral revenue or other one-time cash infusions, possess funds which are not needed for the operations or for the near term. So a couple of examples that I could give you directly is the city of Casper has, over the period of time, we've never been able to pass the 6th cent, but we've only utilized the 5th cent in the city of Casper has not used that for operations. They've done capital investments into the community, whether that's infrastructure or the Casper Event Center, now the Ford Event Center or something like that it's been named. So the city of Casper has about somewhere around 15 or 20 million of perpetual funds that they've want to set aside, have set aside, and would like to get a better rate of return. Given the current restrictions, these entities are unable to invest them more aggressively, and the current returns on investment are paltry. Take WyoStar 1 and WyoStar 2, for example. Both accounts are authorized by statute and managed by the state treasurer's office. WyoStar 1 focuses on liquidity and low-risk investments, but only returns about less than 1% currently. And WyoStar 2 is a little more aggressive and longer term. And I think last year was around 1.7% return. With interest rates for the foreseeable future expected to be near zero, the opportunity to put the funds held by local governments to work does not exist. So the passage of this constitutional amendment, which we need 2/3 from your body if you so choose to move this forward today. We need 2/3 there. Then it goes to obviously the vote of the people. And again, we need, I believe we need 2/3 from the electorate. So with that, the meat of the bill, it's pretty simple. Page 2 is the language that's underscored starting on line 16. It was amended by recommendation of the governor's office and that's in your engrossed copy as far as some language that would fit better for the process. So with that, I try to answer any questions that you might have, and the experts are actually in the room more so than I. Thank you, Madam Chairman and committee.
Thank you, Representative Sweeney. Questions for the representative? Senator Kolb, I see you're a co-sponsor. Any words?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. I expected as much, so I'll say a few things about it. It's always been a challenge with investments and the restrictiveness of our current regulations. As I'll refer back to when I was county commissioner, it was an issue. And I think anytime we can give a little bit, we can give more freedom with the safeguards is always a good thing. So I stand fully in support of this bill.
All right, wonderful. Any questions on this end for Representative Sweeney? Senator Cost?
Thank you, Madam Chairman and Representative Sweeney. A couple of questions I have just to try to get some things square in my own head. Who would be in charge of these investments, number one, and who makes the decisions, number two? And then I noticed it was capital stocks and association or corporations. Is that strictly the limit of those? I mean, is there the guideline? Are there no guidelines on them or opening? It's just whatever they want there. Thank you.
Representative?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Very good, terrific question. And the whole goal, and that's why the language had to be kind of amended and crafted better. So my understanding of the process after this would be voted on by the electorate and we're successful, hopefully, then it comes back to the legislature. And the whole, I think you will hear, depending on who is online and in those things, the whole intent is to put those investments with the state treasurer and with the investment tools that's already provided. Most of our municipalities really don't have that kind of level of expertise. And I did consult with our chief investment officer, and he is in full support, the treasurer's in support. And that's the intent. It doesn't read like that today. You are correct. But that's what we will go to. And that's the intent of the governor's recommendations on the amendment that's already in place.
Follow-up, Senator Cost?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Then would you be opposed to some form of amendment that would put that in there as some kind of a guideline? Because I get a little nervous saying, sure, let's go with this with the intent. I'd rather have something in my writing.
Representative Sweeney?
Madam Chairwoman, so my request is no, because my understanding and perhaps the governor's office could clarify that a little better, but my understanding is we're mirroring Amendment A with this language when that took place. And I think there's already the sideboards that it comes back to the legislature to put that after the election, put that actually it's up to us to specify.
All right. Seeing no further questions from the committee, we'll go to public comment. Representative?
Thank you.
All right, I see Mr. Krager from the governor's office. Please come forward. If you're in the room, could you please raise your hand if you intend to testify on this bill? All right, thanks. Welcome. If you'd introduce yourself to the committee and share with us your thoughts on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman, members of the committee. Rob Krieger, Governor's Office. I'll be brief. The good bringer of the bill hit on most of the points, but the governor is in favor of this bill. It is mirrored language from his work as treasurer on Amendment A. Senator Costa, to your question, I think the governor shares the same concerns of making sure we do have parameters around how these funds can be invested. And that was the reason for asking to bring that amendment to require a 2/3 vote of this body if it were to pass the hurdle of the voters and come back here. That 2/3 vote would stay in place when building those parameters on these investments. So that was the idea behind it, because the governor shares that concern. But I want to thank the committee for looking at this bill, and we'll stand for any question.
Questions for the governor's office? Senator French?
Thank you, Madam Chair. But aren't voters going to want to know the parameters when they go into the voting booth to vote on this? They're going to want to know, hey, it's going to be the county funds or the city funds are going to be invested in A, B, C, and D versus send it back to the legislature and they'll decide how to invest that. Any comments on that?
Madam Chairwoman,
Mr. Krager?
Senator French, good question. During Amendment A, I think that same question came up and honestly took a little bit of a campaign effort to explain the constitutional language, how we want to make sure that is and then going forward with the legislation that would come to put those parameters. But to make that clear to folks, because I think that was a question then too, that it's not, not picking and choosing certain stocks or something like that, that would fall hopefully under the treasurer's office where that expertise is, and would be a little bit in line with how the state invests the funds as well. So hope that answers your question.
Question for both of you. This is significantly different than Amendment A. I mean, Amendment A simply extended the amount that the state could invest in these private funds. This is authorizing the cities and towns and counties to invest, and there's no requirement in this bill that they use the treasurer's office, which would be a safety mechanism, I believe, because they do lack that sophistication with the public's money to invest in the stock market. But even if that protective measure was in place, do either of you see any kind of fiduciary duty concerns regarding different obligations of being a steward of the state's funds as a state officer whose job is to manage state funds, as opposed to, say, the town of Bags, when potentially those, investment plans, those goals might be different, and those monies need to be held in different ways? And is that too much for the treasurer's office? I mean, it seems actually quite complicated with varying fiduciary duties associated with each government entity potentially in the state.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. So my understanding of the process is different than that, and I certainly don't disagree with the chair on what Amendment A did and didn't do. One of my concerns is that we make it too complicated on the ballot, just like I think happened with the investment, or not the investment, but the bond cap and indebtedness for cities for investment back into their communities for sewer projects or whatever, which failed because it was too broad, too complicated. If there's the concern, and we could draft some amendments that would be not too complicated. I know, talking for my municipality and my county in particular, they have no desire to invest outside of the current process. Their monies, they want to invest put their monies with the state treasurer's office. So.
Yeah, Representative Sweeney, I agree with you that the ballot language needs to be simple and clear. But the information campaign associated with what voting aye or voting no on the ballot actually means, I think, is lacking, because there's no parameters provided. So, I have concerns about that. And then concerns about, I get that the cities would want to use the state treasurer's office as an investment vehicle and utilize that subject matter expertise, which they can't afford or have. I don't doubt that. That would be prudent for those that choose that path. But what about those that don't? There's no limitation that they just don't decide to go play the stocks, right?
Madam Chairwoman, so my understanding, again, that it comes back after a positive vote from the people, then it would come back to the legislature to set the parameters at which time. But if
Representative Sweeney, and I'm just trying to walk through kind of the logistics of it. I understand that the vote would occur probably, if this were to pass, when would that vote take place?
Madam Chairwoman, my understanding is that next general election in 2022.
Okay.
So
Senator Cost?
I like the idea, don't get me wrong. I think the idea of the treasurer taking it is an extremely wise move. I have two concerns though. First of all, as I had said before, the lack of it in here makes me nervous because I know there's a lot of people that are going to read this and go, whoa, 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 where's it going? The other part is we have this famous idea in our state, and I'm not knocking it, of local control.
Mhm.
And I'm wondering how many counties, how many municipalities are going to agree in your particular county. You have one big municipality and one county. We talk of other counties that have two or three. And I'm just wondering, how's this going to play out is my concern. Will one of them want to say, no, we want to invest it ourselves, or we don't want, I don't know. I'm just wondering where that goes, and I'd like an answer there.
So to that point, Madam Chair, so I think when it comes back, it's then the legislature's point. And I don't disagree on local control, but the local cities and counties don't typically have that kind of expertise. So I just, and if there's some sort of an amendment that I'm fine with that as long as it just doesn't overcomplicate what has to go on the ballot. If there's additional sideboards.
Senator French?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative, just to kind of follow up on Senator Cost's thing. The local communities, cities, towns, counties, whatever, if this were to pass, they can still, to clarify for me, they can still opt out. They can say, can't the county say we have X amount of funds and we're not going to send it down to the treasurer's office. We're going to keep it in the bank at 0.5% interest or whatever it is. And I mean, they still have that say to decide, don't they?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So absolutely, this isn't forcing anybody to do anything. It's giving them the option to do what they feel is prudent for their municipality or their county. So, but thank you for that clarification.
Senator Kolb?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Representative Sweeney, I did have a question though on page 2, line 16. The word may provide, being this is optional, if they want to go down this road, why wouldn't we want to make the legislative body say shall and and go down that road instead of leaving it a question? And I wanted to ask you that question, what you thought about that difference of words. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Representative Sweeney?
Good catch. I think that would clarify actually Senator Cost's concern and well, would it not?
Well, Representative Sweeney, the legislature never likes to be forced to do anything. We do that for all the other state agencies, but I don't know that it does. I think it just tells the voters that we're going to do something in the future. We don't know exactly what that looks like. Go ahead and vote. That's all it does. Mr. Krieger?
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Just to clarify, and I don't want to get too ahead of my skis on this since I'm not in the state treasurer's office, but it is my understanding that public funds do have to follow an authorized investment policy. And so I think this would fall under that as well, to your concern. So while this is the first step in many steps, to your point about one-off stocks that's, certain people might want to buy or something like that, I think they would have to follow this authorized policy that I believe goes through the treasurer's office. Just wanted to note that.
I think that's fair, Mr. Krieger, that there are significant policies associated with the investment of public funds. All right, let's go to further public comment on the bill. Stay close. All right, any further public comment? Mr. Fraser, please come forward. And if there's any public comment in the Zoom waiting room, if you could raise your hand. Welcome, Mr. Fraser. If you'd introduce yourself to the committee.
Thank you, Madam Chair. For the record, David Fraser, Executive Director, Wyoming Association of Municipalities. Most of the points I intended to cover have been covered, but if I may just amplify a couple of them. We share some of the same concerns that the committee has voiced, in that not all of our members have the expertise to take care of this. For that matter, not all of them have the capital to take advantage of this. And I kind of predict that most of our members won't participate in this. In fact, there are other funds available that are more liquid and more less risky that they're invested in now. And I think many of them will stay there. Those that have and the kind of funds that Mr. Sweeney described, which could include permanent endowment funds, which you see most often in cemeteries, but sometimes you see that, sometimes someone gifts an endowment to the local library, or in one case I know of in our state, a swimming pool has a permanent endowment, and they're just not able to draw good interest on that. And so this would give them the opportunity, potentially give them the opportunity to do that. I urge the committee, if you do amend this, to please keep it simple, because we want the voter to be able to understand it and vote on it. With these constitutional amendments, I've learned that a non-vote counts as a no vote, and so if we confuse the electorate and they don't vote on it because they don't understand it, that counts as a no vote. So I like that it's simple, and I'd like to keep it as simple as possible. Back to my original statement, we like that the legislature will put guardrails on this for all the reasons that have been mentioned here. And in fact, I would just amplify why I think it's important. Number one, that it stays simple, and number two, that it gives the legislature the authority to make those rules, is because once it's put in the Constitution, it's non-negotiable. Well, it's only negotiable through this kind of a process. Again, when the authority is granted to the legislature, of course, there'll be, I'm sure, quite a deliberation on exactly what those guidelines look like and how local governments can participate. If as been stated, kind of our vision is that the local governments be able to participate with through the state treasurer, but the legislature may opt for a different route as they put those guidelines in place. And in fact, because those rules would be made in statute under this proposal, if that means down the road, the legislature would be authorized to make changes if and when it becomes apparent that some fine tuning or adjustments are made. So we really like the simplicity of this. We like that it gives the legislature the opportunity to set those guidelines, which of course gives us the opportunity to have input on what I'm sure will be quite a deliberation as how that is set up. And I want to thank Mr. Sweeney for his work on this. Appreciate the committee's time, and I would stand for any questions.
Questions for Mr. Fraser? All right, seeing none. Thank you, Mr. Fraser.
Thank you.
Well, that will go to online, to our Zoom public comment. With Mr. Bertaglio, if you could please start your video. And if there's anyone else in the Zoom waiting room, if you could please raise your hand.
Okay, I'm working on the video.
We can hear you, so we'll wait.
Okay.
can see you, so
You can see me?
not quite
can-
yet.
Oh, there we are. Okay, good. Thank you. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. My name is Paul Bertolio. I am the chairman of the Board of County Commissioners in Natrona County and also a member of the Board of Directors for the Wyoming County Commissioners Association. And I am here to lend my support for House HJ 9. Local governments are always looking at their funds as being mostly liquid. General operating, everything is very short term. We have some capital needs that we can plan for, but every once in a while we do get some windfalls. And give you a very good example in Natrona County with the sale of the hospital to Banner. The county now has $115 million that we do not want to use for any short-term capital builds or any ongoing operations. The hospital was a hard asset for us, and we would like to continue to keep that corpus of the $115 million intact. The earnings off of that could be utilized for ongoing operations, could be used to for revenue bonds. But in the long run, we understand your concerns about the local governments and their control over it. I'm a firm believer that this needs to be under the treasurer's office, whether it's in a separate fund called local government funds or part of the permanent mineral trust fund, is not where we're really concerned. Where we're concerned is we want professional money managers. We want to take this out of the local data, swings in who's in office and who's not in office, personal preferences. This needs to be done professionally and with an eye towards once the funds go in, they don't come out. Wildstar 2 has a 90-day window that the funds go in. We're talking about perpetual with this type of investment, with the forethought being that earnings off of that can be used for ongoing operations to some degree. We hate to, put all our eggs in one basket and say that we're going to get 5% every single year, but it would take some pressure off of us in managing these assets. It would also take some pressure potentially off the legislature when you look at funding local governments. This isn't going to work for every town, city, and county. There are some where they need every single penny they have moving forward. But there are others where we have had some windfalls, whether it's been large oil and gas economic years, or where, like I say, in the case of the Wyoming Medical Center. So there are certain funds out there that would be targeted for this. It wouldn't be every single spare penny we have. I think the parameters need to be very well defined by the legislature, and we're comfortable with that approach at this point. So with that, I'd stand for any questions.
Commissioner, questions for the commissioner? Senator Cobb.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I know that you county commissioners recommendations rank all of the bills that you guys are looking for. Do you have any of this bill?
I'm sorry, Madam Chair, I did not catch that question.
Commissioner, if you have a YouTube stream going on your computer, if you could shut that down,
Okay.
see what's occurring. There's that feedback.
I'm trying to figure out how to do that.
You're just fine. That may or may not be it. If not, we'll have Senator Cost
Okay.
ask the question again.
I'm hearing you quite fine. It was just Senator Cost.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll try again.
Okay, I got you good now. Thank you.
Okay. I know that the county commissioners usually get together and rank the bills with favoritism and all, and I was wondering if this one's been considered or not, and if it was, what the rank was.
It was right on the verge of very strong support, but it was support.
Commissioner, what was the hesitation against very strong support? What were the conversations?
Oh, Madam Chair, I think some of it is that concern of some of the smaller counties that there is this fear that you get a rogue group of commissioners or council members or whatever, and they're going to get too aggressive with investing funds. Again, we have the Natrona County, for example, we have some unallocated 1 cent funds that we have accumulated over years that we will invest in the fairgrounds in a major project that might be 2 or 3 million. Those aren't the type of funds we're talking about. And I think there's somewhat of a misunderstanding that any reserve fund you have or any reserves out there that you're going to put in for a project that's 5 to 7 years out. That isn't what we would anticipate the funds are for, but I think there is some concern amongst some of the commissioners that that's exactly what would happen. Again, I think the discussion that you all have been having about putting some very strict guidelines and having it done, especially by the state, with the oversight of the Treasurer's Office, is exactly what, from at least from my perspective, and those that we're in strong support of it, that is our view.
All right, thank you, Commissioner. Questions for the Commissioner? All right, seeing none, thanks for being with us this afternoon, and we appreciate your feedback and the comments from the County Commissioners Association.
Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. Welcome, the Chairman of Appropriations, Senator Perkins. It's great to see you. I understand that you have some comments on House Joint Resolution 9. We are pleased to hear from you if you want to share with us your thoughts.
I have the disadvantage of not having heard the other comments, and so.
I'll walk you through, Chairman Perkins,
No,
if you
that's
can, briefly.
Okay, I was just wondering if all of you had, what I'd really like to know is if there's any particular questions or concerns or additional background or other information that the committee would like.
Yeah, generally, we've heard commentary that everyone is in support, from the County Commissioners Association to Representative Sweeney, to the governor's office, that they think this is the right direction and a tool for cities and counties to use for another way to generate some revenue for their struggling communities. Concerns that the committee have expressed is the lack of specificity concerning what happens next if this resolution were to pass, and how that information gets communicated to the voters. I don't think that there's any concern about really the substance behind the concept, but the lack of specificity. So if this bill passes, what does that information campaign look like? What do we tell our constituency about what it means if they have to vote on this? Whether the Treasurer's Office really can manage this, we really haven't heard from them. Representative Sweeney has told us that generally they're in support, but really that lack of specificity of what is the investment capacity that should be attributed to these cities and counties. My concern is, does the Treasurer's Office have the capacity to manage the investments for 99 cities and towns and then all 23 counties? What if those are different investment policies? What if they should be different? And really how that really gets managed on the ground. So the lack of specificity is the concern, Chairman Perkins.
Okay, well, thank you. And at the end of the day, this is something that's been talked about for probably 5 or 6 years. It used to be that, and of course, what we're talking about is investing, is communities and counties be able to, at their discretion, certainly no requirement, but if they want to, and quite frankly, it's those that have reserves. Those that don't have reserves will not be participating. They're not going to participate in this. But there are some communities and counties in our state that do have significant reserves, and in the past, those have been limited only to be able to be invested in fixed income. And of course, what we learned in the last decade or so is fixed income is oftentimes as risky, in some cases even more risky than equities. It's just been a different world, particularly in the low interest rate environments in which we live. Any modest change in the interest rates, because interest rates are so low, have a dramatic swing on the effect of the value of the underlying asset. And so as people look to be able to, one, to preserve the value, but also two, to develop some income or some way for this to grow instead of basically deplete, the object is to be able to invest in very similar to what a pool A would be. One of the reasons I think that there is a lack of specificity is just simply, and looking at that, we've looked every way and around and tried to get through, and there's just not a way to get around the constitutional prohibition against this. So until the Constitution is made to reflect that this can be done, there's just nothing that really can be done.
So Chairman Perkins, we heard Representative Sweeney shared with us that he anticipated that this election for the voters would take place in the general election in 2022. Do both of you anticipate having the legislature continue to work on this in the next session, 2020, the next special session, and in 2022, so we can have more details about what that looks like, or what's the next step if this were to pass?
Thank you. I think one of the things that would happen is next, I think, would be whether you would simply have a similar investment, which, if you remember, we've just adopted. Those have gone to the House. We've just adjusted to the risk-weighted rate of return, and remember those discussions. And so ultimately, that's done. This will be similar to I believe that the Treasurer's Office would kind of consider this a separate pool. It would be a WildStar 2 or some derivation or some name that designates this as an individual pool. And so once the legislature sets just a really broad spectrum of what the overall investment is, whether it's very similar to the languages just passed, it might be so simple as a modification to include this pool in the legislation just passed as far as risk rate of return. Once that's done, then ultimately that's really about all the involvement the legislature has. After that, it goes to the SLIB board and the IFC who discuss it and determine the investment policies for that fund, and then then that investment policy and plan is executed by the treasurer.
All right. Thank you, Chairman. Helpful.
Thank you.
Any questions for Chairman Perkins? Us. Senator Cole would like to fake you out. We're just doing some cautious.
I was just moving forward.
Any other questions? All right, thank you both. Any additional public comment on the bill? If there's anyone in Zoom, if you could raise your hand again right now. We're about to close public comment on the bill. Representative Sweeney, are you expecting any other public comment? All right. Anyone else? Okay, public comment is closed. Committee, back to you. Moved by Senator Cost, seconded by Senator Kolb. Discussion on the bill. I think we should try to amend it with some really complicated language, just to watch Representative Sweeney squirm.
Madam Chairman,
Chairman Perkins.
I think we can do better on the ballot statement. I really do.
I think so too, Chairman Perkins. All right, but we'll leave that to Representative Sweeney and Chairman Perkins to draft. All right, question being called on the bill. Roll call vote, Judy.
Senator Cooper,
Aye.
Senator French,
Aye.
Senator Kolb,
Aye.
Senator Cost,
Aye.
Chairman Nethercott.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, HJ 09 passes with 5 ayes.
All right, thank you. Thank you, Representative Sweeney. Thank you, Chairman Perkins. All right, Representative Sweeney or Larson, I know Zwanitzer just popped in and out, and he's up next. Representative Zwanitzer is on his optional municipal tax election.
I gotta tell you, that was worded much better than the last one.
It was. Sommers and I spoke, and we're going to do his bill on Monday. Yes. So, thank you for being here. Yeah. Okay. We will be doing House Bill 179, optional municipal tax election, and he just popped in, and I think he's going to be right back. Representative Zwanitzer, could you? Please, I think he's just right outside the door. All right, if not, we'll just switch it over. Hello, Representative Zwanitzer. We saw you pop in and then just pop out. Are you ready for, give you a minute? We're going to do House Bill 179, optional municipal tax election. I see we have the Chairman of Revenue on as co-sponsors on the bill, former chairman. Yes.
Yeah.
Great to see you. Welcome to Senate Judiciary Committee. Thanks for being here on such short notice. Can you walk us through the bill?
Certainly, Madam Chairman, and thank you, Senate Judiciary. We're doing that meeting across the hall, and as you can imagine, 60 people trying to get testified. And Senator Cooper, we already did your bill for you because it was quick and easy. And so, Madam Chairman, especially to the new members, the cities and the counties, just to give you the backstory, spent 3 years working on some type of agreement for cities to be able to have some control and authority over municipal taxes. There's commonly referred to as 3 pennies, your general purpose, your special purpose, and your economic development tax that counties can lay on. And so every county has a different matrix of a 5th penny, a 6th penny. Goshen County has a quarter for economic development. We, after 3 years, through corporations and revenue and bringing the parties together, did get to a process which is basically twofold to be as quick as I can here. One is if your county does set on a tax, either the general purpose or a specific purpose, your city can then levy an equal or lesser tax. So up to that, let's say a 1 cent special purpose tax, your city could then come in during the duration of that tax and go up to a 1 cent municipal tax or a quarter or a half. So that's the first way it's envisioned, but it's time limited to the length of what your county has for their tax, their sales and use tax. The second purpose is if your county cannot put on a countywide tax and your city still wants one, the municipality can go to your county commissioners and through resolution ask for the allowability for the city to put on a tax. So I always like to use Lincoln County. As you know, it's a very diverse county that's geographically really split into 2. They have had several countywide tax ballots over the years that have gone down, even though a majority in southern Lincoln County, the greater Kemmer area, have, I would say, over 60% supported, but northern Lincoln County has not. So this would allow that process, which we passed last year, for them to go before the county commissioners and ask for a resolution specific for, let's say, the city of Kemmer or the Tri-Cities there to do this. So through all of the conference committees, and those of us who were here remember it was lots of amendments and went through a second conference committee. The way it worked out was that cities could not impose this additional municipal tax except for on a general election. And so how the system then works is, let's say a county puts on a county-wide tax for a specific purpose. They're building a new county firehouse or new sewer system, whatever it is. The city would then have to wait up to 2 years to be able to put on an additional tax, and the project might be time limited to 3 years until they pay it off. And so the way the statute reads, once it's the county specific purpose is satisfied, you automatically lose the municipal. And so it really just became unworkable after the dust settled from the second conference committee on what we all thought we agreed to. When looking at it, the current statute says only in a general election. So what we have done originally was just to allow the municipality to come forth at any time, and currently it's 90 days after the county, either through resolution or when the county would put on a specific or general purpose, to allow the city to hold, a municipality, a city or town, to hold an election. The House did feel that was overly broad, and so we mirrored the bond statute of what you see before you, where the city could go at those specific times, 4 times in an election year, 3 times in a non-election year, and put the question before the voters of that municipality to be able to put on either the general or specific purpose or economic development tax for that city. I know that's really complicated in a short time. Happy to answer questions to try to clarify that, committee.
Thank you, Chairman Wanitzer. Questions for Chairman Wanitzer? Senator Kolb?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Like your lapel pin, Senator, or excuse me, Representative.
Thank you.
And just the question is, I think it's always been, I think there's a general thought out there that when you have an election for something on an off year, it'll generally favor that item that came up on the ballot, you know, and I think it's a way that I think anybody that kind of has been looking at this realizes it seems to be like, I'll just say it, they're trying to get something through. And for that reason, I'm very hesitant about supporting a change to what we currently have. I do understand the conundrum you faced with the commission and how those taxes are to be allowed. I think that's, you know, I do understand that. But on this, can you explain why it'll be the same outcome or fair, let's say, to the electorate when they go to the ballot, if they know even there's even a special election because it doesn't happen in the right years? Could you elaborate on that? Thank you.
Yes.
Chairman Wanitzer?
Thank you, Chairwoman and Senator Kolb. And as I discussed on the House floor many times, I was very honest, and that is very true. All of the research says that your tax proposition does have a higher likelihood of passage if it's not during a general election. And certainly special district projects in my county, like the community college. And it is just generally seen as true anecdotally. And so that was some of the testimony in the House, that we limited it to the same time as bond elections. We tried to find something in statute that if you can go ahead and ask for a bond at those times, you could do this as well, because that concern was widely shared, that the city or municipality at any time could say, hey, there's a public outcry for, you know, a new firehouse, and we think we can get it through right now. Certainly not the intent of the bill, but the statute right now, I think, as you'll hear, is it's so limiting that kind of negate the 3 years of work that we did. So that's why we've brought it back this year to open it up some, but try to keep some sideboard. And we believe the bond election statute for those specific times was fair. If there is a better, I think we're all agreeable to such, because we all share that concern, certainly in the House.
Any additional questions for Chairman Wanitzer? Senator Cost?
Correct me if I'm wrong, but excuse me, they still have to get permission from the county commissioners to run that tax on, even if it's in an off year, don't they?
So Chairwoman, Senator, so there's two ways envisioned the statute. This municipality would still have to go before their Board of County Commissioners should the county not put on that county-wide tax, to ask for the permission of the county commissioners. So yeah, there is another, I hate to call it a fail-safe, but there is another level to ensure that the county commissioners of that entire county have given their consent that, yes, you can bring this forward. And it really is, as you'll hear, situations in 4 or 5 counties that are just so diverse counties. And as you know, in the current statute, you have to have a threshold to put county, especially specific projects, on the ballot. And so I've always kind of called it coercion, where you have to get that threshold. It used to be 3/4, now it's 2/3, I believe, to agree to put that county tax forward for specific purposes. But then every municipality gets something, which has always kind of hurt my municipality, in my opinion, that per voter, we've funded the smaller municipalities at a greater level to get their consent to put a county-wide on. And so there's some counties that doesn't work, right? We have 2 counties, Park and Sublette, that don't have, as Commissioner French, former Commissioner French well knows, a general purpose tax. And so allowing some of those municipalities to say, we believe our voters would put this forward, like say an economic development, $0.25 in Cody. There are some real, I think, situations where this could apply, and the voters would certainly be heard.
Thank you, Chairman. All right, any final questions? Appreciate hearing from you. Stay close. Is there anyone in the online waiting room who wants to speak to this bill? If so, raise your hand now. And is there anyone in the audience who'd like to speak to this bill? Please come forward. Again, I know that there are some participants in the waiting room, so if you can hear me, if you could raise your hand now if you want to speak to this bill. Welcome, sir. If you would please introduce yourself to the committee and share with us your thoughts on the bill.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. Justin Schilling with the Wyoming Association of Municipalities. Here to speak on behalf of this bill for the 98 cities and towns in Wyoming that we represent.
I thought there were 99. No?
We represent 98.
Okay, right. Gotcha.
If we could get Senator Kolb's help, maybe we could make it 99. As you all remember with the municipal option tax last year, there's a lot of if-thens in the way that bill finally passed. As the Representative Wanster outlined, obviously, if there is a specific purpose 6-penny tax in place in a county, then that municipality is allowed to ask for a municipal option, partial cent, full cent, whatever it is that they'd like to put to their voters. With the general election provision, however, it puts together some very interesting conundrums when it comes to timing. If you're in a county that still votes on their 5th, many do it through continuation of their county commissions, but many still do, even Laramie County. Say you vote on, just for sake of example, you voted on your 5th cent in 2020. You put together a 6th cent, say in 2022. Then because of the general election provision that's in for the municipal option tax, you would have to wait till 2024 to pursue that, which would also put you back up against your 5th penny, as that's a 4-year term on your 5th penny, which pursuing 2 pennies on one ballot obviously is a bit of a climb. And we worry that it would cause confusion with the voters as well, that you would have situations which those were part of the rules that we had set up with the counties. Part of the compromise of that bill was to avoid a situation where you would have the voters picking between a municipal option tax and a countywide tax. So a bit of an unintended consequence of that particular amendment that pushed everything to the general election. As Representative Wanitzer had mentioned originally, the way that this was drafted was the original bill language, which would have allowed for purely special called elections, so on and so forth. The bond election statute, or following the bond election statute, obviously Wyoming voters have voted on those dates for bond elections for decades. There should be some expectation that we go to the voters with questions on those dates. To Senator Kolb's point, I'm reminded a little bit of my sports days long ago, when we'd show up to a bad field under rainy skies and start to complain about the conditions. And our coach was quick to make the point that we're all playing under the same sky. The notion, certainly statistically, there is some notion that off-year elections tend to bring a favorable result. But I think organization on either side of a particular issue has just as much opportunity to push for an easier result or a less strenuous result, I guess, in that case, if you have less voters to convince. But again, with our 98 member municipalities, not all of them will be able to take advantage of this. Obviously, it's the larger tax-based communities that are interested in this, but they're also the communities that stand to see some of the biggest cuts in coming years. Obviously, we've been told repeatedly this session that direct distribution, is something that we need to start to learn to live without. And cuts to that amount tend to hit our bigger communities disproportionately as far as the amounts of money that start to disappear for those communities. So wherein is with our specific purpose taxes in the past, I know there are a certain amount of legislators that see that kind of as the next shiny dangled thing. It's a rec center, it's a pool, it's a botanical garden. I think as things move along here, you'll see that these specific purpose taxes and municipal option taxes are going to be presented for very practical things. And in some cases, things that we have to get to in a shorter time frame than we would like to if we find out that something's in a failure state or we get information that something is going to need to be replaced on a shorter time frame than we initially anticipated. I think the ability to get to our voters a little bit sooner, explain that situation, and ask for their help in fixing that situation is going to be important and is going to be fairly critical in some cases. With that, I would take any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Schilling. Questions for Mr. Schilling? Senator Kolb?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a general observation at this point. Now we it seems like a game of one-upsmanship between who can put a tax on first. And obviously, I think if you're the first one to the table with a new tax proposal, you probably have a higher likelihood just on that fact before the voters, maybe change their mind on that issue. And I'll just say on the last outcome of how these taxes work out and who can put it on when, I think, obviously there's problems there. And this is an attempt, it looks like, to try to rectify that. I do still say that I'm still, I look at the end of the day and what we're going to have with taxation. And I don't know if this mechanism sounds like the best choice. I know it's a choice, but I just wonder what your opinion is on the overall situation. I mean, with talking about it.
Sure.
Thank you.
Mr. Schilling?
Chairwoman Northcott, Senator Kolb, our cities and towns are really varied in their revenue generating abilities is probably one of the hardest things about that landscape from our standpoint. Obviously, for our bigger communities, the municipal option tax was something that was asked for by the capital city, by the big city in the center of the state. They pushed for it very adamantly because they do have that tax generation revenue capability, while the city in the center of the state hasn't necessarily taken as much advantage of specific purpose taxes as this city has in other cities such as Laramie, where the residents have been fairly quick and fairly agreeable to taxing themselves to improve their communities. It'll be a big help. The problem with any of these long-term solutions or trying to find long-term solutions for municipal finances, many of the solutions like this that would benefit a broader tax-based community can't help a small community that maybe has a convenience store and doesn't have any other retail tax base to speak of. So it is an interesting conversation, and hopefully one that we can continue to have and work with the legislature as we move forward because there really isn't a one-size-fits-all solution that's going to fit this. This will benefit the larger communities and give them a tool, as some of the tools or some of the pass-through funds that the state has traditionally provided kind of continue on a downward trend.
Follow-up, Senator?
Thank you, Madam Chairman. So could I assume you're in favor or in support of the statutory change that allowed the Board of County Commissioners to dictate this process? That we're now talking, the taxation process about who can put a tax on when and take it off. That issue, what's your position on that?
Mr. Schilling?
Senator Kolb, are you talking about, just for clarification, the municipal option, the rules and regulations as they pertain to this municipal option tax? Or
As they currently sit with the Board of County Commissioners and the optional tax with your?
Yeah, so the Board of County Commissioners, they do still have a say if there is not a countywide tax in place. If a countywide tax has been passed, then the municipality has the ability to pursue the tax without permission. But again, when you talk about countywide taxes versus this municipal option tax, it's the same players. And that was also one of the considerations that we made when that particular facet of that compromise was made, was the idea that the big city and the county still has to play ball when it comes to putting together a good countywide tax proposal. Because if that's not in place, they can't pursue their municipal option tax. So it forces partnership and good stewardship of the bigger community trying to push those countywide taxes forward so that they can, then pursue the tax that they would like within their borders.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Schilling. Any final questions for Mr. Schilling? Mr. Fraser, very, very briefly. We've got another bill to get
You
to.
bet. Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to amplify in relation to the last question. One of the things that made this such a heavy lift to get into statute in the first place was the concerns about who beats who to a tax, and we don't want to compete with each other and all that. We did meet with, our executive boards met together. We actually hammered out a compromise between the counties and the cities where we all felt comfortable that we wouldn't be cutting each other's feet out, one another's feet out from under us. And there were some real compromises made by the cities in that regard, because we didn't want because we support, those countywide taxes as well. We benefit from them. And anyway, we made some compromises to make that happen. So I just wanted to make sure that it was repeated, since it would have been a topic last session, that the cities did make some compromises to the counties that made this agreeable to the counties. And
Thank
they
you,
in
Mr.
fact supported it. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Reedman, I see you just walked in the room. We are on House Bill 179. I'm about to close public comment. Do you have any comments? Okay, seeing none. Public comment is closed on the bill. Committee, back to you. Moved by Senator Cost, seconded by Senator Cooper. Discussion on the bill? Question being called. Senator French, did you want to make some comments? No, you're just ready to vote. All right.
Senator Cooper,
Aye.
Senator French,
No.
Senator Cole,
No.
Senator Cost,
Aye.
Chairman Nethercott.
Aye.
Madam Chairman, House Bill 179 passes with 3 ayes and 2 noes.
All right, thank you. And with that, thank you, Chairman Monitor. We will move to House Bill 65. Representative Larson, great to see you. We're on political subdivisions deposits. And Representative Larson, just so you know, it's 1:30. So if we need more time, we do have time on our agenda for Monday morning. So if we run out of time today, we'll take the bill over to Monday morning, okay?
You're kind, Madam Chairman. Thank you. So members of the committee, thank you for, I know this bill was shuffled around a little bit and ended up in your lap, but if we could just turn to the bill, and let me go through the bill, and then we can discuss the rationale behind it. So if you look at on page 2 there, this is referring to how the treasurer may, where public funds can be deposited. And we're saying the state treasurer can deposit public monies into any bank chartered under the laws of the U.S. And if you come down to line 8, we add some language there that says, with respect to the deposit of state funds. So those are state monies, okay? Bank includes, and it lists there on 9 and 10 and 11 what constitutes banks. Then as you come down to 12, we put some new language in there, and we say with respect to political subdivisions, so municipalities, okay? So we've taken care of the state funds. They have to go to a bank. But local municipalities, maybe like Wright or Shoshone or somebody, a small town, with respect to deposit of those funds, a bank means any of those banks that we talked about above. And then on line 17, it says when practicable, and that's following the Constitution in 15 and 7, that it says it has to be deposited in a bank or when practicable. And then we put in there, or when a bank is not available within a 10-mile radius of the principal place of business of the political subdivision, an institution approved by the Board of Deposits. So in other words, if there's not a bank in town, but there's a credit union in town, they could put their money in a credit union. And that's the essence of this discussion. In my county, in Senator Cooper's district and in Senator French's district, we each have a community that doesn't have a bank, but they do have a credit union. And so with law as it currently is, they have to take their cash to be deposited, and they have to take it to a bank. Now in the community in our bank, they have to drive to the town of the Wolverines and put the money in there. And we've had the discussion, well, surely we can do this by mail. Surely we can do this. And they testified to us several times that no, they can't. I actually ran this bill about 3 or 4 years ago, and we ran out of time going into the Senate. This community came back to me and says, can we please try? This is just a pain in the hind end for us to do this each time. Now, when we done this, we had the Attorney General come and look at this back when I ran it the first time. And they agreed that the language is a little ambiguous. It certainly says, and it's because there's a conflict. The Constitution says in a bank when practicable, but our statutes clearly point out that it should be in a bank. And so that's why they say if you have some defining language that would allow an exception, it would be possible. Now, in the discussion we had, we says, okay, in try to keep in the spirit of the conversation with our banks, that's why we put that 10-mile radius. If you left this building and went 10 miles any direction, you're going to go by a bank. If you were in Shoshone and went 10 miles, you'd either be at the mouth of the Wind River Canyon, someplace between Shoshone and we're out in the gas hills. And so we're trying to make this requirement of having a secure place to put their public funds a little easier for them to do. Madam Chairman, happy to go into much more conversation. Time's limited, probably a lot of comment, but happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Representative. Questions for the representative? Senator Cooper, I see you're a co-sponsor. Any comments on the bill?
Madam Chairman, thank you. I'm going to ask that we apply something that doesn't happen down here very often. It's called common sense. And I can't see any reason for these municipalities to have to drive 30 or 40 miles when there's an institution in their town that is capable of managing and safeguarding their deposits. It just doesn't make any sense for them to have to drive halfway across the county. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Senator Cooper. All right, with that, we'll go to public comment. Is there those online that would like to speak on the bill? Just have some. All right, Mr. Highsmith. Mayor Highsmith. Mayor Highsmith, welcome to the Senate Judiciary Committee. If you could turn your video on.
There we go. See me now?
We can. Great to see you.
Excellent. I'm going to be real short. I'm going to turn it over to my chief of police, but this is very important to the town of Shoshone. Not only monetarily, but safety. We have our chief of police delivering our funds to our Riverton's our nearest bank. Bank done us a great job there in Riverton, but it would be much easier if we could deposit our funds in the credit union right next door to us, and that would allow us to transfer our funds to Riverton instead of pulling away our chief of police from our town to go to Riverton. I would like to, Chris Kojai is our chief of police, and I'd like to turn it over to him.
Wonderful, Mayor. And if you could just introduce yourself for the committee.
Oh, excuse me, Madam Chairman. Joel Highsmith, Mayor of the town of Shoshone, and I appreciate you taking my comments.
Absolutely. All right. Thank you, Mayor. With that, we'll go to the chief or the officer.
Thank you, Madam Chairwoman and members of the committee. Chief of Police Chris Kojai. I also serve as the town clerk and town treasurer for Shoshone.
Sure. Okay. Welcome.
Thank you. Obviously, with some of the financial aspects we're encountering, as well as multiple state, really, we're trying to take cost-saving measures. Hence, me doing multiple positions in a small town makes sense, as well as this bill makes sense. I generally have one officer on any given day. So when I'm working, I have to take the deposits to the bank. Even if I have another officer take the deposits to the bank, still taking an officer out of the community for one, sometimes up to 2 hours, depending how busy the bank and the traffic is getting there. Between lost productivity and time, that's costing us on average about $300 a week between fuel, maintenance of the vehicles, as well as obviously the loss of productivity. That adds up to $10,000 to $15,000 over the course of a year, which for our coffers would be better utilized in a lot of different areas. We have a bank, a credit union, literally across the street from town hall, where we can make our deposits. And while we have a great relationship with our current bank in Riverton, we would foresee that continuing. But as far as being able to make the deposits in a timely manner and not take away from our ability to function in the town, would be not only common sense, but it would be a great benefit. That's all I have.
Well,
Thank
thank
you.
you, Chief and Clerk and Jack of all trades. We appreciate seeing you and all that you're doing in all those capacities for the town of Shoshone. Of note, I was a wrangler for a short while. How's the fast lane?
It's getting big. They're looking to expand. They're currently getting ready to start their construction phase of their expansion project.
Of that I'm confident. Well, good to know. Thank you. Any questions for the clerk / chief? All right, seeing none. Thank you, sir. Good to see you. All right, any additional public comment on this bill? Okay, well, is public comment on the bill? Any public comment? Mr. Meyer, if you could come forward. Welcome, Mr. Meyer.
Thank you, Chairwoman Nethercott, members of the committee. Scott Meyer with the Wyoming Bankers Association. Let me preface this by telling you that up until about a year ago, when I assumed this position with the Wyoming Bankers, as a practicing attorney, I represented large and small credit unions and for about the period of about 25 years. So I understand credit unions and I respect credit unions and I like what they do. They certainly have a niche. Question kind of is a little bit as long as they stay within their lanes. But the issue really is that as looking at this, there are some specific differences that I think I need to point out real quick regarding these. Community banks are different than credit unions. Community banks are there to serve the entire community, regardless of where anybody lives and what everybody does. Credit unions, on the other hand, are really, at least theoretically, and there's always been some push on that, there to select certain employee groups or group. So they have a certain limited area where they work. With that being said, then, what is being proposed right now is, at least as I understand it, the idea was we need a place to deposit cash, not just other deposits. It's just the issue is cash, and therefore they were required to make some trips. What's being asked of this right now is that you're taking taxpayer funds and depositing it into an entity that is tax exempt. And that rubs a little bit wrong with your communities and your community banks. I will tell you right now that yes, credit unions do pay payroll taxes and they do pay property taxes. But credit unions do not pay income taxes, which may not be a big issue in Wyoming since we don't have it, but they still pay them. And community banks do pay sales tax. Now, I say credit unions generally don't. If they have a light bulb that goes out in their office, they go to the recent store, the local store, and they might buy one, and they're not going to do anything about it. They're just going to pay the $6 plus tax or whatever it is. But when they go out and they buy office equipment, when they go out and buy furniture, when they go out and do construction projects, and they do all these things, they are very quick to point out that we have a tax exempt license and we don't pay sales tax. And that, in fact, does affect your local communities, and it impacts the state. So with that being said, you're saying, okay, what else have we got here? Now, banks are required by law to participate in the Community Reinvestment Act, and that requires these banks to put money into their communities. With respect to the community that the good bringer of the bill talked about, banks support the local senior citizen center. They support youth activities like 4-H and FFA. They support all sorts of activities like that. I am not saying that credit unions do not support their communities. And I will tell you, I'll come right out and tell you that some of the credit unions I've represented have their own foundations, and they do that. But interestingly enough, when the original Community Investment Act was drafted, it had credit unions in there, and by some lobbyist or whatever reason, credit unions were excluded from the Community Reinvestment Act, so they are not required to do so. Then there's the fact that community banks are the ones that are participating in your communities and providing commercial loans. Generally speaking, credit unions do not provide commercial loans. They are more in the areas of ATVs, cars, what have you. They do some mortgages, but it's the community banks that reinvest in your community and deal with those with community loans. And finally, I would point out that if you recall a year ago, the issues that were before this state and before this country, it was your community banks that stepped up with an enormous amount of support for the PPP program. And I'm not saying that the credit unions didn't do that, but they definitely didn't hit it out of the park, where your local community banks in Wyoming issued millions of loans to billions of dollars regarding the PPP. That's your community bank, and that's what's going on here. And finally, with regard to those distinctions, I want to point out that when banks support their municipalities, they are required to reserve from their own security portfolio an amount equal to whatever those amounts could be with respect to that municipality. So a municipality can say, I'm going to put $100 into your account, and we will keep $100 into your account every day for 364 days. And at the last day, they put in $1.5 million. With that kind of an investment, the banks have to, by law, keep a reserve on their accounts for the total amount. Now, a lot of banks have to anticipate what's going on, so they reserve that. That's a ding to their portfolio to make sure that they have covered municipalities. So that is where I look at the differences between these credit unions that I do respect and banks, because they are two different animals. Now, from a very practical standpoint, and based upon the testimony that I've heard, we have a distance from the front door of the town that was mentioned to the city of the Wolverines, to their bank's front door, of 22 miles. I don't know how we're getting all these costs in there and all this time being gone when it's 22 miles each way. But I'm just saying it's not really that far apart. And when you look at it from that standpoint, if all we're talking about is cash, and we're not talking about these other kinds of deposits, then I'm not sure that it has to be done every day, because 15,000 miles a year that was mentioned, that's making a trip 44 miles, 22 each way. And that's not even to the closest bank. It's just to their bank that you say we're making this trip every single day. Now, certainly, as you folks have known, on your own phones, you can do remote capture. Remote capture devices are available. They can do it for checks. They can do it for money orders. They can do it for cashier's checks, anything that comes along that way. So we're really trying to carve out a spot into this bill to say, for whatever few $100s we have, then that's what we're trying to save now. And I'm looking at this going, okay, I did my own research. The amount of money that is coming in there because of this is primarily from speeding tickets. And most of those are paid by check. But if they're paying them by cash, then you're talking, like I say, maybe a couple $100 a week. The rest of it all can be remotely captured. And that directly affects how the banks are doing business. And that's directly affects how they are taking care of that community and other communities like it. My other thought is that having done some research since this bill first came out, an overwhelming majority of the municipality's money is deposited through ACH. And whether it comes from the state, from sales taxes, or whether it comes from other revenues, almost all of it is automatically deposited. So whatever monies we're talking about, like I say, if we're limited to cash, and maybe you can't put that in the mail, you probably could. But the reality is that maybe with the coins, it doesn't take that much, and we're not running it back and forth every day. Now, the other practical thing is that when I look at this, I have gone to visit the credit union in the city that's over there by the reservoir. And they do have an office in looks like the city fire department. And it's a one-room shack. And I empathize with them, but I talked with the credit union about this. And members of the credit union told me, yes, we have one person there. They probably use furniture in there, not paid for with sales tax. But my point is they have one person in there, and that person commutes from the city of the Wolverines every day. And they bring with them the cash that they need, and they take it home every day, and they put it in the car. And I'm like, okay, I don't know why the credit union is able to do this and why all of a sudden it's a big security issue to run $200 worth of cash. I'm just saying that practically, when you look at this, I don't understand the issue, I guess, really compared to the implication of what this does to your Wyoming community banks. It's just, it doesn't seem to all add up. And finally, members of the committee, I will tell you that with respect to the bill itself, I have some problems. We have a 10-mile radius. I don't know what that means. I don't know where that number comes from. The last I heard was on a discussion on the House floor was because that was in the prior bill. I will tell you right now, 10 miles is arbitrary. And in my world of practicing law and as an accountant, arbitrary, whether it's in a statute or whether it's by common law by a court, is dangerous because I have no reason to back up and understand why we have a 10-mile radius. There's just arbitrary. We decide this 15, 5, I don't know. And finally, I will say that if you look at the language of the bill, if in fact there is a 10-mile radius and they don't have a bank there nearby, they have some other choices. And of course, it's all limited to what the Board of Deposits says, but there's nothing that prohibits them from then using a credit union or anything else in Casper or in Cheyenne or anything else. So I don't understand really why this has become an issue. This bill has been out here for a long time, and every year they keep bringing it up. And every year I keep pointing out that there's a lot more differences here than one might suspect. And it's your community banks that have stood up and now say, we oppose this bill. I'll stand for any questions.
All right, committee, it is 1:51. Is there anyone else in the room who wants to speak on this bill? Well, we're going to go ahead and lay the bill over to Monday morning, recognizing that we have people, it's 1:51. We gavel back in at 2. Senator Cooper wants to defend his bill. And so I'll give Representative Larson a chance to come back. I know it's painful. I know. Monday morning, we'll come back. Just want to drag it out.
Thank you,
Okay,
Madam Chairman.
so the meeting is, we're laying this bill over to Monday